Good morning, folks. So, this will be the chapter 6 of The Gathering of Soldiers, part 1. And on the last one, which was chapter 5, we had gone over that the soldiers in Prinkipo Island have prepared for a raiding expedition, have fixed up their ships, and stuff like that. So, with this chapter, we'll delve into the next phase, which is actually going on an expedition. This chapter's um, title is called "The Terrible Beginnings and Rude Awakening." Yep, it says it all. So be prepared as I show you the disclaimer. Wait, hold up. There you go. There's the disclaimer. Let me zoom it up for you guys to read. Yeah, so be aware that some of the book's contents may be offensive and harsh in sensitive readers. Yeah, if you're not into those like blood splattering stuff, um, I think it's gonna be on this chapter. Maybe I can go fast enough for that scene or not. I don't know. So if I don't do it, I'll warn it again next for the next round and stuff. So be prepared. Like it's just don't tell me later on that I didn't warn you. Well, anyways, again, just gaze into this wonderful picture. So the guy with red shirt and blue pants is Apostios, and Ephraim has the full plate armor with the red cape. Thomas has the full plate armor with a bushy beard and coarse hair. And Seth has scale armor and some crossbow bolt holders on his shoulder, with a shield on his left side. So let's get into this chapter. Apostius woke up with his back moist with sweat. He didn't remember what dream he had, but he knew it was horrible. He looked around and saw the faint light coming into the room from the window at his left side of the wall. So he realized that he wouldn't be able to sleep anymore. Soon the soldiers around him began waking up, each going to his closet to change into outside clothes and armor over them. They then moved over to the fitting room to change. Apostius followed them, and when finished, he went out hastily with his belongings. Soon the soldiers got into formation on the headquarters field. "Let's march, soldiers!" Lord Pericles shouted and led the march when everything was in order and ready to go. They marched down the streets and through the houses in silence, but when the harbor grounds began, Lord Pericles started shouting and soldiers shouted along. "Follow me, soldiers! We march! We march! We march! We march!" So, when I say these things like 2 times in a row, it means that the soldiers are shouting along. So make sure to take a note of that. Anyways, towards the sea, towards the sea, to the ships, to the ships. Who are we? Romans. What was that? We are Romans. Raise your weapons, raise your weapons. Charge! When Lord Pericles said charge, the soldiers began charging to the ships. The cry was so loud that the whole world seemed to be shaking. When they neared the ships, Lord Pericles continued, "Slow down! Slow down! At ease!" The soldiers stopped in front of the ships. Then Lord Pericles walked up the stairs of the harbor station. "Soldiers, on my orders! We'll use 2 ships, the large combat ship and cargo ship. Their storage rooms have been filled with sufficient munitions, weapons, provisions, and water. Therefore, we will put the rest of our supplies sail the seas and later go up the river, and possibly land north of Sultanonu or somewhere before, depending on our schedule. Then we'll raid the place where many of the Turks live, and we raid until the militias come to get us. Then we flee if possible. Understood? So as for this town called Sultanonu, it's around it's north from Eskisehir, which was called Dorelion back then. So and it's near where Sakarya River is. So Sakarya River goes in a like a S shaped into the heart of Anatolia from the Black Sea. So it just around reaches where that town is. Yeah, they're not going to attack the town. It's going to some other place, some other made up place that I had up. But Sultanonu really existed. You can perhaps search it. Um. Anyways, let's get back to the soldiers. Yes, Lord! The soldiers shouted. The soldiers loaded the ship really fast with necessary things. A barrel of black powder was added into each ship so that they could use the bombards. There were two small bombards on each ship. They were mobile, so the soldiers could shoot in any direction. Also, there were three ballistae on each ship and a pitch barrel so that the archers could use flaming arrows. Soon, the two ships began sailing. Lord Pericles commanding the combat ship in front, and the support platoon's commander leading the cargo ship, which tagged behind the combat ship. Most of the melee infantries and their staff members traveled on the combat ship, while the support infantries, along with their staff members, and some melee infantries traveled on the cargo ship. The two ships sailed for 2 days to get to Sakarya River, passing by various villages and towns. They didn't attack since those didn't look vulnerable enough. Finally, they came to where Lord Pericles motioned the soldiers to pull along to the southern side of the river. He then commanded them to dock the ships facing downstream, so that they'll have a much easier time fleeing, should the enemies chase them. After stopping the ships, he sent the spies away to search for nearby towns. He had a week of food remaining in his ship, so he needed the spies to find a place really fast. Then, because they still had daylight, he told the soldiers to move the ships to a safe landing area, and he pointed out the place where his ships will be at to the spies. The spies looked as Lord Pericles was pointing at the area, since returning to a right place was another important thing. They had Turkish outfits, so they could fit easily with the natives around the land. After a while, they set out on horses to search for any towns to raid. Fortunately, the spies returned at nightfall with news that there's a decent sized town worth raiding somewhere south of the woods. It was near a stream that fed itself to the Sakarya River, with granaries and other buildings of value. They also suggested a method of how to attack it. Therefore, Lord Pericles nodded in satisfaction as he heard the news and thanked them for their good work. Then the soldiers took turns maintaining watch all throughout the night because they were in the enemy's territory. When the morning came, the soldiers woke up each other, gently shaking them so as to not make a loud noise. Nobody fooled around since it was very serious. They were all quiet, ready to receive orders that were going to come from Lord Pericles. Attention! Listen to me carefully, since I will lower down my tone. The engineers will be the wagon crew. Then, 6 of you, medium melee infantries will protect them and wait around their perimeter so that the raiding groups will put valuable goods in there. We need to do this in haste, or else there will be some chance that we will be facing the Turkish army. Lord Pericles soon went around and gathered the engineers. But as for the medium melee infantries, it was usually the most injured soldiers or those with the least enthusiasm for the day. After that, the soldiers began talking amongst each other since Lord Pericles was busy telling those 10 soldiers about how to move around the wagons and the backup plans should things go not as planned. While walking around, Apasio saw Seth checking his crossbow's readiness, so he decided to take a look. Seth looked at him approaching. Apasius, I guess we will go straight to raiding. He came at a rightful time, because when Lord Pericles hires people, he brings many of them at once and takes some time off, at least a month, from raiding in order to get them trained and ready for killing. However, you're going right for the juicy event. Wouldn't it be fun? I don't know. I've never killed anyone before. I really don't want to kill someone, Pasio said. Seth smiled. Don't worry, they're the infidels. You can kill them, and most importantly, this is where our lives depend on. Well, yeah, sure. I know about that, but still, though, I hope I get used to it, Pasio said. Then Seth realized that Apasios had a gun strapped on his back. You're actually bringing that along? He had a surprised look. You should be careful with that. Have you ever had a proper training? Frame taught me during the training day. I know how to reload and shoot now, Apasios said. Seth slowly nodded. Good. At least you know that. Make sure that you don't shoot when there's any of us in front of you, since it can go anywhere to hit anyone. Yeah, its accuracy is quite bad, Pasio said. Seth shook his head. We told you, Ephraim doesn't listen, Lord Pericles doesn't listen, and maybe he bots him again, wasting the money on things that no one will use. Pasius laughed. That's why he gave it to me. Okay, that's cool. You got lucky there. He doesn't give away expensive things like that. He still lets the recruits choose, but only amongst the standard weapons and armor. Then they need to pay those up over time. Gosh, your armor is better than mine, Seth said. Yeah, it seems so. I like that it's light, strong, and very flexible at the same time. Pausius patted down his armor. Hmm, your sword and shield are standard ones. But anyways, you have a head start here regarding your equipment because the Lord Pericles went to such lengths to acquire the Damascene sword from you. Seth said and chuckled. Yeah, I understand, Apasios said. Seth started taking something out from his bag and handed it to Apasios. I'm giving this to you because I think you will most likely need it since you're a fresh recruit. They always get hurt and many times medics don't reach them on time, so take it. What's this? Apasios opened a small bag to look what's inside. They're the cloth strips and other herbal medicines for flesh wounds. Don't worry, I have another bag right here with me. Seth took out another bag for Apasios to see. Well, thanks, but you shouldn't give this to me. It's too much for me to use just on myself. Apasios tried to give back the small bag. Whoops, Lord Pericles is talking now. Let's be quiet. Seth turned around and walked towards other soldiers. At that time, Lord Pericles was just done telling the wagon group about their jobs and resumed his command for the rest of the groups. As usual, we have a bulk of heavy melee infantries who will be at the front and they will be followed by medium melee infantries. Support infantries will go on separate ways when we reach the town. Your platoon leader will know what to do when we get there. Everyone got it? Yes, Lord! The soldiers shouted. Lord Pericles carefully looked at his soldiers. Remember to keep your full guard before charging at the village, for there can be ambushers among the trees. Make sure that you have all your armor and weapons before you go. If you don't hurry up and get it before setting out, I will make you do push-ups. At this talk, some soldiers ran back to the ship since they forgot to bring some of the necessary things. Apasius was one of them too, since he forgot his helmet that was on his ship. Ephraim gave it to him during the training. It was a regular steel helmet with chainmail cover for his mouth and neck. He put coif and leather cap on his head before putting the helmet on top. When he returned, the Lord Pericles was about to start speaking. Let's get on moving then. Spies will lead the way for us because they know the sneaky way to the village. Aren't they awesome? Yes, Lord, the soldiers shouted. Lord Pericles adored his spies since the raids were in part successful thanks to them leading the sneakiest of all the paths. Therefore, he trained the spies whenever he could, since they have a chance of dying while walking around in the enemy's land. There were times when spies went missing, so Lord Pericles would have a hard time searching for them. And when it failed, replacing them would be harder since he always sent the best ones out. The spies would get a significant bonus to their wage, since that's how tough the spying is. It was thanks to this method of rewarding spies that he was able to get some willing people to train themselves into new spies. If he didn't reward them, he wouldn't be getting anyone who would volunteer for that dangerous job. Long time passed by, and Apasio started thinking about the upcoming battle. He followed other soldiers in front of him with his gun in his hands. From time to time, his hands would tremble. and he would have weird feelings in his stomach. And he sensed that bad things will surely come in the future. The air around the soldiers seemed very bad too, and others were shifting uneasily while following those in front of them. He prayed in his mind that God will protect them. Pasius got back to his senses when he saw the soldier in front of him suddenly stop. He stopped too. Then the line of soldiers in front of him resumed walking. Soon there was an opening in the town that Lord Pericles had talked about. They were just underneath the shade of the woods that ended on the opening. They watched as the Turks moved about, their bodies clearly seen on the fields. Pasius gripped hard on his gun as he looked at the Turks. They were so happy, just like the Romans in their heyday, and the children were running around. He couldn't believe that he was among the group that would enslave those children. He remembered his old days when he was very short. He remembered how the adults would look down at him with the smiles on their faces. He never knew that anyone would be willing to kill him since none of those adults existed around him. He imagined how those children will think when they see huge men with swords and pikes ready to kill their parents and enslave them. He knew that they would be shocked to death and whip themselves. Charge! Lord Pericles shouted as he led the way. He looked very amazing with his gray cloak flapping in the air as he ran. He had a nice set of tough steel armor with extra protection all over his body. He was just amazing, Pasius noted. He could easily come out unscathed in any enemy's territories. Lord Pericles' boots thumped on the ground as he ran towards the first man he saw. He had come out with a sword to defend the fleeing children. Oh, as he, so he ran towards the first man that he saw. The first man, yeah, it was not. Yeah, he had come out. All right, that was awkward. All right, so I'll resume. Then the soldiers followed Lord Pericles, forming this awesome triangular formation, just like how the birds in the air would travel together during their migration. They all had different kinds of armor and cloak, so it looked just like any other bandit army except that they were rich. The wagon crew followed, watching and protecting the wagons from possible hidden enemies. Two or three soldiers and a horse were manning each wagon, and there were four wagons total. Coming back to where he was, Pasio saw that Seth was telling him to follow him towards the right with the other support soldiers. There was Ephraim and Thomas along with them, telling them to regroup. However, he noticed that Thomas only had a halberd and he looked agitated, possibly due to not being allowed to charge upon the enemies at that moment. On the other hand, Ephraim had a gun with him, with a shield on his back. Urgh! The Turkish peasant grumbled. A Turkish peasant grunted in pain when Lord Pericles struck the sword to his stomach. Go! Kill the enemies and plunder this town! Lord Pericles finished up the peasant with a neat slice of the neck. As soldiers crossed the fence that held the town together, a small contingent of militia came out to meet them. The militia may have been previously warned of incoming enemies because the trees didn't do a good job in giving cover for Lord Pericles' army, regardless of how the army tried to conceal itself. Thus, upon seeing the militia, Lord Pericles shouted, Supports, shoot them all! The supports that the Lord Pericles meant all soldiers who had ranged weapons. It was just that saying supports was much faster compared to saying everything else. After seeing Ephraim aiming at the militia to shoot, Pausius followed without thinking and fired a shot. The stone ball flew across and penetrated through the Turkish militia's shield and hit him on the stomach. Pausius stared in awe since he had never killed anyone nor seen the result of the shot on a person. The militia's stomach was oozing out blood and he was screaming out in pain. It was a terrible scene and Pausius lost his feeling of remorse by now since it was so terrible that he felt nothing at all but to follow Inua's orders. At this time, other soldiers around him fired theirs. They took longer to fire because they were aiming for a moment. Pasios got them because it was pure luck, not really because of skill. Ephraim's gun fired a shot. Seth fired his bolt, then wheezed past, while Thomas looked on with agitation. Because it was such a short distance with lots of people clumped up together, everyone's shots hit their targets. There were four other gunners, so they sat down to reload. Pasios got together with Ephraim and reminded himself how to reload, as he saw how Ephraim did his. When the chaos befell on the rest of the militia and the support infantries were reloading, melee infantries charged into the militia who were backing away in fear. There were still a lot of them. They had no armor but just shields and spears. In fact, most of them survived the barrage thanks to their shields. Therefore, the melee soldiers had a bit of trouble cutting them down. There's still a lot more coming, you fools! Support infantries! Go and attack from the side! Lord Pericles shouted as he noticed more militias running down the street. Seth motioned for Apicius to follow. Apicius, come with us. Our platoon leader is on the move. By then, Apicius had finished reloading and followed Seth, who was following the archers. He looked around and noticed Thomas and Ephraim following them from behind. Then Seth began telling him about how to make formations when ordered. The archers will stand in the back while the gunners and crossbowmen crouch in front. When they arrived at another street, there were other Turks guarding the path. Get into your positions! The support platoon leader shouted. The enemies noticed them and started running with their weapons raised. Everything was happening all at once. Apicius was always on his P's and Q's trying to follow the rest of the soldiers. He did everything he could and hoped to contribute more for the team by being very active. At last, he was barely ready for another barrage order by the platoon leader. Pow! The gunners somehow shot right after the previous shot, just as if there was a secret hand that activated the next shot as the previous shot was heard. The noise gave much fear to the enemy, and they immediately stopped running. But three shots had missed, making the total kill at just two militias. The archers and crossbowmen fired as soon as the wounded militias collapsed, which was after the smoke from the guns was cleared from their sight. Furthermore, using the advantage of chaos, the archers continued to fire as many as possible on the enemy militias. There were 5 gunners, 16 archers, and 14 crossbowmen along with some melee soldiers as reinforcement, who were standing behind resting up for the necessary moment. Archers were most valuable since archery required many years to master, while crossbows and guns could be used by anybody with a bit of practice. But more importantly, due to their fire rates, the archers received much more honor and prestige that were so highly seen at the time. Still, Apicius felt himself as a very special soldier, since he had on a decent lamellar armor and a helmet. Then he looked at the archers and noticed that they only had padded leather with a wooden buckler on the left hands. The platoon leader had a steel buckler that Apicius gave to Lord Pericles, so he smiled at the scene, now knowing who got possession of it. See dear! Curses! They killed our men! The leader of the Turkish militia yelled while blocking arrows with his broad shield. So I searched in the Google translation. The F word for Turkish is called siktir. So that's basically what I got it from. Anyways, so let's continue. Pasius understood what he was saying because he knew Turk language quite well after all those years studying with his language teacher and practicing. Fire! The platoon leader shouted again because there were some soldiers who were hesitating. On the other hand, as soon as Apicius had finished reloading the gun, he quickly fired it. Soon after, the melee soldiers rushed in to stall the enemy soldiers. Then everyone else immediately stopped the firing. The archers seemed to have fired a lot and killed a lot while Apicius reloaded. So he realized that guns take a very long time to reload. There was a soldier who was pushing a cart full of arrows. Probably several hundred were in that. Seth told him that they were grouped around in 20s. So the archers would take a group each time they needed and put them into their quivers after taking off the string that was wrapped around them. Charge! The platoon leader shouted for the remaining armored soldiers to charge when the enemy was becoming too numerous. Pasius took out his shield from the bag and charged with his medium sword after slinging the gun behind his back. Passius was scared, very scared of the enemy militias who were cornering the melee soldiers who were bravely stalling the enemy's advance. By now, the enemies had regained their morale and they started knocking out the melee soldiers. Passius ran over the bodies of the dead militias and felt their soft backs on his feet. He raised up his sword at the last moment when the soldiers around him were doing and struck it down on the first man that he saw. His medium sword successfully made its way into the right shoulder of the militia. He couldn't block it since his shield was on his left side and he was focusing on slashing a melee soldier in the corner. Seth easily drove his sword through the same man's side and triumphed in joy, while Apacios was looking at him with horror. How could it be joyful as he killed a man? Apacios thought. He knew Seth as a kind and honorable man, but what he did right now was way different than that. He saw savageness not only in Seth, but in himself as well. However, he forgot all about that again as another enemy militia drove his spear toward his stomach. The spear got knocked off the armor and Apacius was pushed a bit back. He was grasping his stomach to see if he got stabbed or not. The armor did its job and there was just a minuscule dent on the spot where the spear hit him. He was enraged and struck his sword through the man, but struggled much while trying to bring it back out because the man's flesh and muscle made the sword hard to be pulled out. Suddenly, the man tried to strike at Apacios' right arm, so he immediately had to let go of his sword, making him to be weaponless. The same man lunged at him, so Apacios was terrified of the man's power to stay alive even with a sword through his stomach. Therefore, Apacios held his shield in front of him. Thus, the man kicked at his shield and Apacios fell down. He then crouched in terror and was almost at the point of giving up. Alright, so, yep, the standard cliffhangers. Alright, so I feel like just ending it right there. And I'm gonna continue on the next video. So thank you very much for watching.